Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Exercise Mechanic Podcast. We are back after a summer break that was planned slash not always planned. I'm once again joined by the Exercise Mechanic team, Ryan and Brett. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Very good.
Good, man. Thank you.
Awesome. It's nice to see both of you guys. It's been a hot minute since we did one of these things. We wanted to just kind of open the table, open things up, and just have a little bit of an open conversation about what's new in our respective lives. Some of my stuff's fitness related. Some of Brett's stuff. Some of my stuff is cardio related. Some of Brett's stuff is cardio related. So we're gonna break up the cardio related content with some bodybuilding. So we're gonna start with Brett. Brett, bring us up to speed on what you've been up to over the summer, and then we'll dig into your stuff, Ryan, and then I'll go last.
Cool. I competed in an Olympic length triathlon this summer in Brockville.
Cool.
Probably raced kind of the best race I could have given my training. It was it's an interesting challenge because I was fairly competitive in sprint length when I was in high school. And the Olympic length always seemed to elude me, or I was never able to race kind of a good race. Realized this summer that difference between like an hour and a half and 2.5 hours or 3 hours of competition is like, it's significant. Like it's less about, driving hard and trying to like maintain a level of suffering that's acceptable where what you're doing in like a shorter event, and really having to like pace myself and like dial it back. And like in the event itself, like the bike was kind of boring because like I was just kind of like, one foot in front of the other, just kind of like coasting along and keeping a reasonable pace, but like couldn't really push it at all. And I'm glad I did because the cramps started immediately on the run, and then had to kind of like dial it back. And then I was able to kind of push at the end, which was really good. I was really hoping to be able to kind of like, at the very least, sprint to finish, but I really wanted kind of like a strong finish. So the last like 2.5K, I probably had a pretty good pace going on the run.
What's the distance? Sorry, for those that don't know, what are the distances?
1.5K swim, 40K run, 40K bike, 10K run. And I've got a swimming background, so swimming comes fairly easily, and it's the most kind of technique dependent of the events. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty confident with that, and I came out of the water. I think there was 120 people competing in it. I came out of the water like 25th, something like that, and then was like 50th on the bike and run. Which is kind of to be expected for a guy who's like 230 and a former swimmer. My swimming was definitely the best event.
Nice.
But yeah, generally pretty happy. I would, but the training takes a long time. And with a family and stuff, like having like 3-hour training sessions is tough to fit in a day. So I think I'll take a break for a little while. But I'm the kind of guy who wants to experience everything. So I want kind of a new challenge. And one thing that I'm seriously considering for next spring and summer is to join a track squad, and specifically for field events. Because I used to throw the discus in high school. I'd like to learn how to throw a javelin, and like a few other field events sound like they could be pretty fun to get into.
That's fun. I was just editing one of our old episodes, getting it ready for publishing next week. And it was an episode where Ryan was talking about his frustrations with technology. And he was talking about how he wanted to throw his laptop like a Frisbee. And so if you want any pointers, or perhaps no, I mean, you said you used to throw discus, correct? Is that what you said, Brett?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Okay, so you don't need pointers. But if anything, you guys could just kind of, shoot the shit about laptop / discus / Frisbee throwing.
Yeah, from what I remember, you start low, you get the height on the thing from your legs, not from like getting a huge angle of attack on the thing. I don't know. It's been a while. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to
javelin throwing's pretty badass too.
Yeah. And I don't have a natural great throwing motion. I mentioned my dad being a coach before too. Yeah. And we didn't really have a track and field team at our high school. Certainly nobody doing any field events. So he kind of just took me on and coached me. And when I brought up the javelin, he's like, "Nah, you're not going to throw the javelin." That was the end of the conversation. But I mean, I've got a good build for it. Like I'm tall and big. If I can figure out the mechanics, I think I could be a reasonable masters athlete. I'm certainly not pushing to get into the Olympics at the age of 37, but it's just like a fun skill to learn, I think.
I remember when I first started doing powerlifting for fun, hearing about masters athletes, and now I fucking work with some. That's wild. That's funny. Rye, what's going on with you, man? What have you been up to? I know there's a few things going on.
Few things. Also almost threw my laptop yesterday, so the plight continues. My app that I use with all my clients crashed as I tried to save someone's diet plan.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? It's okay. I'll tidy my house. And then my vacuum stopped working. I was like, cool, I'm going to light my house on fire. I'm progressively just turning into an old man that doesn't know how newfangled technology works, which has been a very weird transition.
I've been experiencing that too, man.
Yeah. I laughed at people my parents' age, being unwilling to learn new technology. And now I'm that guy. So
yeah, you are there. Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of training, I have not swam, biked, or run. So cross those off the list. But
he hasn't walked either, actually.
Done a little bit of walking. But yeah, so I think, I had mentioned before we started recording this, I guess, most recent block of my off season has been really unique. And my body has kind of started to respond in ways that I haven't experienced before. I don't know if I have shared this on here before. I know I've talked about it at some point, but I'm reminded of one time when I spoke with Justin Harris, who runs Tripona Nutrition, and he had mentioned this concept of what he'd called first bodybuilding and second bodybuilding, which I thought was a really bizarre sort of concept. But the way he sort of phrased it was, first bodybuilding is what 90 to 95% of people who ever get into bodybuilding experience, which is, dieting down for a show is incredibly hard because your food's really low, you're exhausted, you have to control your food in any of your growth phases because if you eat too much, you're going to get fat, so on and so forth. So kind of what most people would traditionally think of as their experience within the bodybuilding space. Second bodybuilding is sort of this, evolution in your career where some of those rules start to change a little bit. And, whether it's through just an increase in overall musculature, progression in kind of PED use, etc., you start getting to this point where you almost can't eat enough food and your body just kind of keeps growing, which has sort of been what's happened recently. And on one hand, it's kind of a nice proof of concept that some of the things that I had put in place this year over the last year and a bit has panned out. But I finished my last mini cut. It was about 240, 241, probably in and around, I don't know if I had to estimate, maybe 7% body fat, something like that. So I've started this next growth phase. I'm 6 weeks in. I've got another 16 weeks. I was 258 this morning. So I put on 17 or 18 pounds in 6 weeks. And I'm leaner than I was 6 weeks ago, which is trippy. And I've legitimately gotten to the point where I made a post about this or a story about this today or yesterday, where I've gotten to the point where I'm eating Five Guys 3 or 4 times a week.
And the burger joint.
The burger joint, yeah. And also Five Guys, if you know what I mean. That's why I'm so anabolic. But it's been really interesting where the first time where it started to click, where I was like, ooh, okay, things are happening in a way that I'm not used to. I had a client compete in a powerlifting meet in Quebec City about 10 days ago or 8 days ago. And, we're out for her meet, and then, you go out, you celebrate afterwards. So I brought all of my meals that I normally would eat. So I had kind of my full day of meals, which is probably, 3,500 to 4,000 calories, give or take. Then went out to an Italian restaurant, had a pizza to myself, had pasta to myself, went out for breakfast the next day, ate my meals on the drive home, had a Five Guys burger and fries that night when I got home, and then I woke up 2 pounds lighter, and I was like, I don't understand what's happening right now. So it's been really, really interesting to start to experience, and especially understand, like, there are, you start getting into some of the pro guys are 280, 290, 300 pounds lean. I can only imagine what it's like for them. But
Yep.
like, now it starts to make sense where you get these guys eating 7,000 calories and they stay shredded all year long. So
Yeah. So one thing you've talked about a lot is especially in the hypertrophy intensive has been the effect of stress on body composition and retention. I wonder if some of these things get magnified, at how would I say, higher levels, like higher levels of muscularity, or like the further you get into bodybuilding. Like I wonder, I'm sure this has crossed your mind, whether or not this is like the same, quote unquote, the same thing that maybe you've experienced or your clients have experienced, but just magnified because you're further down the road of the bodybuilding journey. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that that's partially related. Sort of the other side of this as well. If you want to talk about stress management, I'd kind of alluded to this off air as well.
Right.
We'll maybe might talk about it this episode or maybe another episode, but put a real effort in over the last, 4 or 5 months with kind of like a quote unquote mental health journey, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But that has yielded, benefits in just my normal everyday life, which I'm sure reduces the amount of stress that I have, which probably yields a better result from a training perspective.
Yeah.
I even had, I had sort of some thoughts yesterday or the day before where I've always kind of been a meathead and a guy that just loved to train. If Instagram didn't exist, I'd be doing the same thing. But I remember last year when I was competing in the 2 shows that I did, it's kind of the first time where I put this pressure on myself that I felt like I had to have a certain result to demonstrate that I kind of belonged in the bodybuilding world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that and a variety of other factors kind of led to not a particularly great result, especially in my second show. Whereas taking a very extended off season kind of reminded me, I love training. I love the dieting side of things. I like tinkering with stuff. And in a sense, I could kind of care less how I place.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm competitive. I want to do well, but I don't have the same kind of pressure. Yeah. I'm just kind of enjoying the process. So I think kind of a culmination of all of these factors, plus I'm definitely the biggest that I've ever been. Again, always worth noting, kind of at the point where I am running some adult-sized PED cycles at this point. Mm-hmm. So kind of all of those things together has just yielded like a rate of progression that I haven't really experienced before, which has been really interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool.
What's your relationship with food right now, Rye? With like all those meals, does it feel like a chore, or are you still kind of like hungry and like enjoying them, or a bit of both?
Somewhere in the middle. I would say, like, I am a person that likes to eat and I can eat. And I'm not at the point where I'm sick of eating food. But there are times where I would say, because food is high enough, I definitely don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. So I'd more just say, like, I kind of am net neutral on any kind of emotional attachment to food at this point. If I enjoy the food that I eat, especially if I have, like a cheat meal that's pleasant and it can be like a social thing. But I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about my next meal or, craving something. It's like, oh, like I got to eat something because I have another 500 grams of carbs I got to get in today. So.
Yeah, at least from what I've observed, it's like food it's a part of your job. It's like, oh, this is what I need to do. So you just kind of do it, and it seems very neutral from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so.
Did a bit of years ago, like a quote unquote bulk. And I was working like 13-hour shifts. So I'd bring like a picnic basket to work with like 4 meals in it. And by the end of it, I was just like sick of eating. And like, it was all relatively healthy stuff, but I was just like, I don't want to think about this. Like I want the experience of being hungry again. And I'm reminded too I remember watching a video of Brian Shaw, the American strongman. and this like documentary crew is following him around, and he's eating breakfast, and he's eating like a dozen eggs and like 2 cups of rice for breakfast, and by the end of it he's just like, I don't want to do this anymore. He's like almost throwing up because he just can't stand it.
I think at the peak of his career he was like 460 pounds.
He's a big
and obviously
man.
you know he's not bodybuilder lean, but he looks like an athlete at closer to 500 pounds than 400 pounds, which is absurd.
It's crazy what the body can do.
Yeah, those strong men, like their bodies are insane. Like as a quick aside, like I saw some brief meme that was like, Jay Cutler photographed beside some other bodybuilders, and he looks like an absolute mountain of a man. And then it's Jay Cutler photographed beside like Brian Shaw, like Big Z, and like some other strong man, and he looks like a child.
I know
He's
exactly
like a foot shorter than them, and like 50, 100 pounds less than them. Like, it's wild.
If you guys can see if you can post that in the team chat, because I haven't seen that photo, but I'd love to see it.
Will do.
I know that Ryan, prior to recording, you were also talking about how professionally there's been some developments. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah. So the big thing, so some stuff I think we've talked about on here before. Just further details coming out about the Real Coaches Summit, which I'm going to be speaking at next April in Vegas, which is really cool. But very recently, there's a woman by the name of Roxy, who is a bikini competitor here in Ottawa, very, very good national level competitor. And she has this initiative, her and her partner, where they run essentially like a mock bodybuilding show / posing seminar, essentially something to ease people into kind of the bodybuilding world, which I think is a great idea. I think they've run it a couple of times and they're expanding on that. So I will be a part of that that event. Yeah. So essentially I'll be kind of like a judge / posing coach, answer any questions people happen to have. Yeah. But the really unique thing is, I guess they got funding from Ottawa U to essentially run like a grassroots bodybuilding fitness program. And I was asked to be a part of that initiative. So
awesome.
We don't have all the details yet, exactly what it looks like, but essentially I believe throughout the school year, we'll have a series of seminars, workshops, etc., speaking to students, teaching them, all things training, nutrition, for people who are interested in bodybuilding, maybe posing, whatever it happens to be. But it's something for myself that feels really important. I feel like the longer that I'm in this world, this fitness world, I feel compelled to kind of pay it forward.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys feel, but, as much as, we make our living and we collect a paycheck doing this stuff, that in and of itself feels kind of empty. So I love the idea of, I remember being an 18, 19-year-old student in university, being really interested in training hard and seeing these big power lifters at my gym and, wishing that I knew more. So I would have loved to have something along these lines when I was in school. So if even in a really small way, I can impart, I hate to say the word wisdom because that sounds egotistical, but, impart maybe some lessons to some of these kids. It's something that I definitely, feel very invested in.
That's awesome.
I don't think you got to be scared of the word wisdom. You've been in this for long enough. I thought, and you got the wisdom beard.
True. Yeah. Getting conflicting ideas here.
It really seems like bodybuilding's really taken off in the greater Ottawa area. It seems like, especially over the last, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 8 years, really seems like it's taken off.
I've mentioned like the trends before online. Like it felt like a decade ago, every online space was telling you to do like read starting strength and do like strong lifts 5x5 and do like an entry level powerlifting program. And it feels like the zeitgeist, if you want to use a fancy word, has kind of shifted, and a lot of people are training for aesthetics. I mentioned before, like a part of it feels a bit healthier in that like people are openly admitting like, I'm training to look good, and that's okay.
And they've
Whereas
accepted
before
that.
it was like, you got to lift to move more weight, but you can't admit you want bigger legs.
Yeah.
Well, and something I would add to that, and then I really want to hear about your updates, ET. So I was on a podcast last week or the week before. Apparently, I have no sense of time during the summer. It's without this weekly podcast, I have no anchor. But yeah, so I was a guest on a podcast, I think it was 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that we had talked about was, how to maybe communicate or integrate like bodybuilding lifestyle and maybe remove some of the stigma about what it takes to sort of live a bodybuilding lifestyle for like Gen Pop. Because I do distinguish, if you're talking about competitive bodybuilding, like if you're doing what I'm doing, especially if you're on the enhanced side of things, you are inherently taking risks. So there's a line from Stan Efferding that I love, which is, competition is inherently unhealthy. And I absolutely think that that's true. But I think that there are some of the staples, some of the foundations of the quote unquote bodybuilding lifestyle, food tracking, eating lean meats, fruits and vegetables, getting sufficient water, walking,
Fiber,
like all of those things. I think if you can integrate that without the unhealthy side of competition, I think it just leads to people generally being healthier. And as you said, Brett, too, removing the stigma of like you're allowed to want to look good in a pair of jeans. So that was actually a really interesting conversation. And I do like that we are shifting that way. Whether people ever want to hop on stage is one thing. And, we've talked about it on here before. I think communicating some of the challenges and the risks that you would take on if you chose to do that is a completely different thing. But really encouraging people to, eat healthy food, get a good night's sleep, maybe drink less alcohol, whatever it happens to be. I think that all that does is just make people healthier.
Yeah. On this note of talking about people accepting that they have desires when it comes to their aesthetics, we've talked about many times the body positivity movement and how there's been a lot of good that has come from that, right? And as much as all of that is true, there's also been, I think, some challenges that people have been presented with, which is like, well, okay, well, if I accept myself as I am, then therefore I can't desire to be different. And it's happened over the past 6 months or so. I think I've had 3 conversations with different women specifically, more so than men, who had like an element of shame, or they hesitated to share that they had body composition goals along with all of their other stuff. And you can kind of hear it in their voice, like they're tiptoeing around it. They kind of don't want to admit it. And then you just kind of keep poking at it. And then eventually they're like, this is kind of weird, but I kind of want to look like Jennifer Aniston, or I kind of want to have, like a new client of mine was like, I want to have I want to lift my ass. And I'm like, great.
Who doesn't, to be real?
Right? Yeah, me too. I get it. And like you guys mentioned, it is a really healthy thing to just own the fact that that's a desire of yours. That being said, I think it's important to ask ourselves, a part of what makes this healthy is being able to ask ourselves, where is this coming from? And am I cool with the source? Like if you fundamentally hate yourself, then maybe you want to examine that. I don't know. I think it really depends on person by person. But so long as if you examine the origin of these desires and you're like, yeah, I'm actually cool with that, no problem, then own it. There is nothing wrong with pursuing body composition change. And I like that that's becoming increasingly normalized.
I mean, not to say that the pressures don't exist for men, because like they definitely do, but women have it tough and have had it for a long time, like social pressures to look a certain way. And I think a lot of women, when they encounter those pressures, or when their mind starts to veer anywhere near that environment, they just say no and just like push it out of their minds. I am not going to think about body image. I'm not going to think about what I want to look like, because that is like a very quick and steep pathway towards hating myself. And yeah, with the pressures they've dealt with 100%. But I think like, taking it the same way we work in the gym, right? Taking small steps towards, getting comfortable in that environment and with those thoughts. I think it can take some time, but you can get yourself there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, something that I think about too is in the case that you brought up, Brett, because I think that everybody faces, some kind of pressure from a body image standpoint, some more than others. And I do definitely agree that I think it's disproportionately weighed towards women historically. But it's one of those things, I think of this, we've talked about how people fear getting on the scale. And so they avoid the scale. And what I have found over the years with, working with a number of clients is rather than allowing the scale to have power over you and being afraid of it, whatever happens, because it's always in the back of your head. You can say that you don't care, but the reason why you're avoiding it is because you care.
Yeah.
Whereas if you get on the scale every single day, you write down your weight, whatever it happens to be, you're taking ownership of that. So same thing, like who cares what it is that you want to look like? Do you want to have a lifted butt, or do you want to have a six pack? Do you want to have big shoulders? It doesn't really matter. Like, your personal desires are your own, and that's amazing. I like the idea of, again, more and more of this acceptance, as you had said, ET, of admitting that we want to look a certain way, but it allows people to take ownership over it. And then they have control rather than it having control over them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love
something
that.
I've noticed recently, both my mother and my mother-in-law, they'll just be telling like an innocuous story about something. And sorry, Aggie and Kathy, if you're listening. But they'll just be telling like a random story about, a person, a family friend who was, they saw at the store and they're like, oh yeah. And, 5 years ago, she lost a lot of weight. She's gained a little bit of it back now. Anyways, we were chatting about topsoil, and it's like, that had nothing to do with the story. And you totally understand like where it comes from in our generation and like generations past. I'm sure their mothers talked like that too. And yeah, it's a fascinating subject, and I'm hoping that we're getting over it bit by bit, that generational trauma, and allowing ourselves to talk about it a little bit. But yeah.
Totally. Yeah. On my end, I know I'm really happy to hear everything that you guys had to share in terms of your summer updates. Of course, like we mentioned when we opened, I think it's been about 6 or so weeks since we've done one of these things. So it's really nice to connect with you guys. On my end, I think it's a shorter list to state what hasn't changed, in terms of updates. The big update is that my wife and I moved back to Canada, specifically Ottawa. We landed on Sunday of this past weekend. So of last weekend. So we've been here for just over a week now. And that's been a huge adjustment. Currently, we're crashing at a friend / client's house till Thursday, and then moving into our house and setting all that stuff up, which I explained to you guys before. So that's been just a huge process. We looked at the calendar, and we've essentially been living out of our luggages for like 6 or 7 weeks. Even when we were in Geneva, because of the prep that needed to happen for the movers to come in and put our stuff in a shipping container so that it could then go on a boat. The lead up to that was really intense. And so we've been living out of luggage for 6, 7, or 8 weeks. And right now it just kind of feels normal, but it's when you take a step back and you look at it, you're like, yeah, I'm fucking exhausted because of just, you're constantly just not in your shit. And it takes a lot of bandwidth. But in any case, we've landed here now in Ottawa, which feels good to kind of have turned that, how would I say, to have started this new chapter, to have closed the old book, turned the page, whichever, analogy you want. Feels good for that to be, in a way, kind of done. Like, we're here now, and now we're just waiting for some of the other steps that we took, a month or so ago to materialize here. But a lot of that stuff is outside of our control. So that feels really good. To be back here. I'm sorry?
I said, welcome back, eh?
Hey, yeah, thanks, man. So speaking of coming back, I've been talking to, this is a topic of conversation. We were talking about weight earlier. So this is, in a way, very similar. Canadians are huge, absolutely enormous. And of course, I think that like if we were to go to the States, my guess is that it would be even more significant. But Canadians are fucking huge. And like just on average, like on a population level, we are enormous. And I'm not just talking about like body fat levels. I'm also just talking about like our skeletons and average heights and widths. It's insane. And it's to the point that like over the past few years, anytime that I would come back to Canada after spending some time in Switzerland, I would land in the airport in the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Airport in Montreal, and you get off the plane, and it's like, whoa! Like not only once again, not only just large people in terms of height, but like very advanced obesity, just surrounded by it in the airport. And it was always really shocking because in Switzerland, it is not at all the case. Like you can go a week, like a week between sightings of someone that you would categorize as like overweight or obese. And that's just kind of like a normal thing. Then you come here and it's in a way like it's everywhere. And so this has been an interesting thing because my wife and I have been having this discussion. We were in Gatineau Park yesterday and just talking about how like, man, like it really, you go overseas and you come back here and the things that we accept or that we've perhaps labeled as being quote unquote normal might be normal for, for North Americans perhaps. But if you zoom out, it doesn't seem to be normal on the world stage, and especially in very specific areas. And at least for me, it's really I've been hit in the face with this realization of like, as a country, I think we really need to do better. And we've talked so much about like how would I say acceptance and body positivity and all these things, and all of that it coexists with also acknowledging that maybe there's room for improvement as a country, and how on a person by person basis, compassion is absolutely required. But then when you zoom out and you look at population level data and you look at, or even just population level like observations, and you're like, whoa, this isn't just an N of one problem. This is a society wide issue or challenge that we are currently contending with. And so in any case, that's been a really interesting piece of coming back home. What are your thoughts on that? Like when you guys have traveled, have you observed something similar?
Definitely. Like I did an exchange to France when I was 14, and I distinctly remember there was one kid in the school who was like, according to BMI, he would probably be overweight, but not obese, or maybe on the line. And he was the only overweight kid in the school and was like the token fat kid. And harsh words, but like if he would have come back to Canada and joined my school, he probably would have been pretty normal, maybe on like the high side, like, top 50% in weight or top 75%, but like certainly not picked on the way he was in France. And another thing, like I do get really interested about like politics and policy and stuff like that. And it's interesting. I see Ryan smiling and nodding because he's got the same kind of nerd fascination I do. But like you look at data around like car-centric neighborhoods and your ability to like walk to grocery stores and like it becomes this problem that isn't just like motivation. It's not just like Canadians are doing less push-ups or we need to like eat some more veggies. Like it is an entire like huge issue where like, how are we going to like put in more bike paths? How are we going to like change building codes so we can have smaller and easier accessible grocery stores? Like, how do we change public transit to get more people on their feet? And like this a huge issue that goes well beyond just like hire a trainer and get better. When you look at these large populations and statistics like that, it's really interesting for me.
Absolutely. I'm happy you brought that up.
Yeah, I think Brett and I were going to kind of take the same angle. So I haven't had as much exposure traveling overseas. I've only been to England one time. And to be honest, I don't really remember what people looked like. But certainly when I go to the US, as you had said, ET, they're often that much bigger per capita. than we are here. But to Brett's point, I don't want to sound like I've been radicalized, but maybe I have been. I think that this is potentially one of the big pitfalls of like a predominantly capitalist society where everything is about the bottom line. So, for example, I saw, now take this with a grain of salt because there's tons of misinformation that could be out there. But I think even just the fact that this concept could be plausible says a lot about what is going on, within North America or just kind of capitalist countries in general. So because of the prominence of Ozempic and other weight loss drugs, as a society, people are eating less junk food, they have less food drive, etc. I recently saw that some of these big companies like Hershey's, Nestle, whatever it happens to be, are now investing in trying to find ways to make their food even more addictive and drive even more of a dopamine response to override these weight loss drugs so that people will keep buying their food. So you have a system that incentivizes, like from a monetary perspective, incentivizes people to make the rest of their society unhealthy and create more and more junk food or whatever it happens to be. So say what you will about that. I don't have too much commentary on politics here, but I don't think it's an accident that countries like Switzerland, Finland, Sweden, predominantly like socialist countries where they invest in this type of infrastructure that allows them to, have grocery stores that are walkable, programs that allow people to, be more active, whatever it happens to be. I think just there's a huge philosophical difference between those societies. And I think you see a huge difference in the body types that exist within those societies. And I don't think that that's an accident by any means.
For sure. Yeah.
Hey,
and
Ryan, I'm the radical leftist of this podcast, so I'm going to need you to back out of my Kool-Aid here.
All right.
Yeah, but to both of your
I'll just say the word
respective
gay
points,
and then I will get canceled or something. I don't know.
if you haven't been canceled yet, that's pretty impressive. It doesn't seem like it's the kind of thing that can be reduced down to just any one individual variable, right? And how would I say, the various stimuli that affect people and populations. It's very, very, very numerous, right? And it's not just like one thing affects one thing; it's one thing affects everything, and so there's this ecosystem that promotes certain behaviors and deters from others. But anyways, it's been really, really, really interesting, and it's to the point once again that like even my wife will be like, "Oh my God, like I'm really noticing what you've been talking about over the last 2 years," and like 'cause she hasn't been coming back as much as I have, and she's been mentioning it. I'm making it sound like she mentions it every day, which isn't the case, but she mentioned it a few times, and I was like, this is interesting. I'm not crazy. And it once again is kind of jarring. In terms of so once again, in terms of big updates, the move back to Canada has been one of the really big ones. There's two other things that have been really, really cool. So in the past, this was I don't know, maybe 2 or so months ago on one of our podcasts, we had talked about my upcoming race. As a part of the whole UTMB kind of circuit, there was a race in an area called Grindelwald in Switzerland, which was called the E51, which was, it's kind of weird. They call it the E51 like as if it's 51 kilometers, but it was actually 53.8. So anyway, I did that thing. In terms of an update from the event, the event itself was absolutely amazing. It was more than I had hoped it would be. The sense of community was unreal. The views, of course, were spectacular. The whole thing, it was just such a fun event to participate in. And I have no fucking idea where I qualified, like in terms of like final result. And I don't care. It was the kind of thing where it was so pleasant to be a part of. The one thing that was really cool is I smoked 61 people on the downhill. I gained 61 places. Because I was just like, yo, like throwing myself down the hill.
That's
I
awesome.
would have just tucked and rolled down the hill. Use gravity to my benefit.
But it was funny because you could look at like your statistics of where did you start, and then in this segment, are you plus or minus? And so in some of the ascents, in most of the ascents, I was minus. On the flat sections, I was slightly plus in the sense that like I would gain places in a positive manner and pass people. But then on the downhill, it was disproportionate. It was once again over the course of I think about like 1,300 meters of descent, past I think 61 people.
What would you attribute that to? Do you think
I was just going to ask the same question?
Yeah. Do you think you're able to like turn off your fear a little bit better and just like let loose, or maybe strength training helps?
Yeah. So I think it's a combination of things. My body, I think, in comparison to a lot of runners, from a maximal strength perspective, I have more. So, and if we think like descents are just brutal on feet and knees in particular. And so I think I can just tolerate more of that kind of stress. I've also practiced the downhills. I mean, I've been fortunate to be surrounded by, not surrounded, but to have a few high level trail people in my network. And also just I've been consuming an ass load of trail content. And people will talk about how like the thing that'll kill you are the descents. Like the descents are harder than the ascents, and people don't think about that. But when you actually start doing it, it's you feel that. And so by extension of that, I practiced the descents. Like when my wife and I would go on hikes, we would be, we'd be together for a portion of it, and then I'd be like, see ya. And I'd have the hiking backpack with like a lot of weight in it, a lot of water, and I would be running down. And then I would wait for her and she would catch up, and then I would run down again. And, and just as a means of getting in reps. So I think that that's a part of it. And then through that kind of practice, you also start to feel a little bit more comfortable. You trust your feet to turn over fast enough to, so that you don't face plant. That was really fun though. Yeah. Unfortunately, we had some pretty challenging weather. There was a weather system that was moving in. And so they actually had to modify the race. So instead of it being essentially 54, they chopped it down to 41, which is still a sizable distance, of course, but it pissed me off because I wanted to go further than 42.2. I wanted to go just a little further than the marathon distance. And it ended up being 41. I was like, you got to be kidding me. But in the grand scheme of things, honestly, it was such a fun experience, and I can't wait to do something like that again. There's
I think you just missed one at Camp Fortune. Actually, it either just happened or it's maybe coming up in the next like couple of weeks. A pretty big trail race.
Tremblant?
No, Camp Fortune near Ottawa.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. I'll have to look into that. I wasn't aware of a Camp Fortune one, but there's one going to be, there's one that's coming in the Charlevoix area of Quebec. Where is that? I guess that'd be north of Quebec City.
Yeah, just a little bit past it, northeast.
Yeah. And
that's beautiful around there. I don't know if it's called an escarpment, but like the bluff or whatever just goes right down to the St. Lawrence. Mm-hmm. I've skied at Le Massif a number of times, and it looks like you're about to like ski into the river. It's cool.
Yeah. I've never been. And, but there's an event in that area called the Ultra Trail Haricana. And that's this coming weekend. And those organizers are partnering with UTMB, which is kind of like one of the, it's I would say recognized as being the ultra trail organization in the world. And they're bringing one to Quebec next year. So there's going to be one at Tremblant. Cool. And so there's a 50K category and there's a 100K category, which is 80 kilometers. So I'm for sure going to be doing one of those next year. Don't know which one yet, but so that's really cool. And then last thing that I'll say, just like from a personal side of things, before I share, I guess, a work development, is we did a hut-to-hut hike to kind of close off our time in Switzerland. So our last week in the country, we left from this town called Arola, which was around 18 or maybe 1,600 meters, can't remember. And then over 5 days, you essentially hike to various mountain huts and you don't rejoin civilization for that period of time. And it was one of the best experiences of my life, like bar none. best vacation I've ever taken. Insane views, great food, cool people, horrible sleep at altitude, bad. But yeah, absolutely wild experience. I was gonna say I think you guys should try it at some point, but I'm looking at you, Rye. I don't know if it'd be your cup of tea, but
That's not going to happen.
I think at some point, if ever it comes a day where you're like not bodybuilding anymore, and you want to do something kind of like that, you would honestly lose your mind with the scenery. It's crazy.
Yeah, there will be a day. I don't know how I feel about sleeping in anything other than a very comfy king size bed, because I'm spoiled now. But there's a day where I don't want to be this big.
Yeah.
And actually having some cardiovascular capacity would be great.
Actually, on that topic, Rye, it's been in the news lately. I mean, Bautista for a little while, and now The Rock shedding some weight. And they're both, I think they're both in their 50s now, or at least I think The Rock is 51.
Yeah, they're both in their 50s.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any thoughts around that? Like, I don't think Bautista's been a bit more open about it. I don't know if The Rock has come out and said like that he's doing it for health reasons or anything.
Yeah, so I know, as you said, Batista's been a lot more vocal and like more transparent, and I think he's also been transparent about past drug use as well. And the Rock still has his image, and
it's just cod, just 18 pounds of cod.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's a really smart move. Like, this is something, I'm sure, at least in private, ET, I know we've talked about. I think in competitive bodybuilding, you have to have an exit plan. Mm-hmm. And, whether I've always said, I'll bodybuild up until a point either I'm not interested in anymore or the health compromises are too great. I do think that there's a way to be intelligent about some of the risks that you take and, take some necessary precautions. But you do get to a certain point, like, if you're The Rock and you're 280 pounds and to hold that kind of size at that age, you're probably taking that much more gear to offset whatever that natural decline is that's occurring. There's going to be a point where you're probably just not going to live very long. So I imagine, whether he said it or not, I would have to believe that it's at least in part due to, some health precautions. And on the flip side, I know he's rumored to be, or he has already been nominated for an Oscar now. So I could see him using this to shift into maybe being more of a serious actor. Because I think that when you're the size that he is and the size that Batista was, there are so many roles that you probably just can't play, because you can't be believable in anything other than a super jacked up, character.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, as much as I kind of liked just as like a fanboy, everyone kind of liked The Rock when he was super jacked and having the big pancake meals and all that stuff. But I think that it's most certainly a smart move on his behalf. And anybody who I think is on the enhanced side of bodybuilding, whether that's recreationally or competitively, there's going to be a point that you have to pull back on stuff. Otherwise, you just probably aren't going to make it very long.
Well, I saw DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, recently had a stroke too. He started DDP yoga a while ago, and he's really into like this kind of shtick is like he'll like take somebody who's like morbidly obese and like barely mobile, and get them to the point where they're like active. Like I think he might have worked with Butterbean when he was getting really, really sedentary and had all these health issues and stuff like that. So his shtick has kind of been like, let's lose some weight, get you mobile, and like, recognizing the harm that he probably did to himself in his wrestling days. But yeah, I just saw a photo on Instagram of him like recovering in a hospital and like doing stretches in his hospital bed and stuff like that. Like, I can't imagine the amount of like time those guys spent on the road as pro wrestlers. Like, they can't have been doing things properly, or like, taking those assessments of risks that you talk about. Like, they'd be wrestling like 200 days of the year. Hulk Hogan, it's been disputed, but he claims that one year he wrestled like 370 days because with the time changes of going overseas, he actually wrestled like on multiple days, like had multiple shows flying from like Japan and back and stuff, like just crazy on the body.
Yeah. And one of the big things with those guys in particular, you know, because they're wrestling so much and it's so physically strenuous, many of them either use and probably abuse painkillers. And that those guys run into a lot of issues. There's usually, how do I phrase this? There's kind of an idea that I try to impart on people if they get into the enhanced side of bodybuilding, which is, you know, this isn't a hard and fast rule, but I think it's a good, just general guideline, which is your body can handle one vice. So if you're going to be to put it blankly, like if you're going to be a steroid user, that's your vice. You can't be a guy that does a bunch of gear and then drinks and does party drugs or whatever it happens to be. And if you want to be a person that drinks and parties, don't do steroids. Like you kind of got to pick your poison, so to speak, quite literally. So I think that's the problem with those guys, as you had said. You know, they're on the road all the time. They're eating whatever they're eating, probably on the tour bus or on the flights or whatnot. They're sleeping like crap. They're obviously all roided up because there's a certain image that they sort of have to have for the WWE. They're almost certainly taking painkillers. Many of these guys are taking recreational drugs. Like, it's a recipe for disaster for many of these guys. I think that's why you see a lot of these wrestlers like pass away pretty young. And I think that it's a culmination of all of those factors. But you compare that to, say, the bodybuilding side. I think of like Arnold is probably the great example. You know, Arnold used probably a decent amount of drugs in his, 20s and 30s. He's 74, 75 now. He's in great health. He stopped taking, at least in mega doses, stopped taking steroids to the degree he was when he was competing. And if you look at a lot of the things, he still exercises. He rides his bike every day. So he does a lot of these health promoting activities as an older man. And I think there's a reason why he's been able to maintain his health into his 70s. And I think he's probably the blueprint if he wants to live that type of lifestyle and then transition into hopefully being a healthy elderly person. You just can't crank it to the nines your whole life.
Just be Arnold. It's
just be Arnold.
Just be
easy.
I wasn't aware of this rock weight loss thing. So if I've seemed slightly distracted, it's because I've been pulling up some photos of him while you guys are
yourself over shirtless photos of the Rock.
That's it. Yeah. So if my face is looking not flushed, the opposite of flushed, the blood's going elsewhere. No, it's man, that's really impressive and intense. His weight loss from what I can see, just with the limited photos here I can find on Google. That's wild. And it's all for this new role, right? For this he's playing a mixed martial artist. Is that it?
So if you look at the pictures of him on screen, he's fucking yoked. He's huge.
Okay.
So he's lost a lot of that weight, and I imagine come off a lot of stuff post filming of that role.
Okay, I understand. So his role, he was still quite beefy for that role, but it's since the role that he's really lost a lot of weight. Okay, fascinating, really fascinating. How is this being? I don't know if it's just because of where I've been in the world, or that I was in the mountains for essentially a month, or if it's just cultural differences. But when I was in Switzerland, no one was talking about this. This is literally the first time that I hear about this.
I mean, nobody I hang out with is talking about this. It's just the weirdos I follow online.
What was it? You said it was your mother-in-law? Online, your mother-in-law commenting on people's weight and stuff. Did she also comment on the rocks?
I don't think she mentioned it, actually. Yeah. I don't know if my mom is following Dwayne The Rock Johnson super closely.
Yeah.
I do think that this is relatively like a relatively new story. I think I only saw it yesterday or the day before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rye, I like your comment of one vice at a time. It reminds me of like only break one law at a time. Like if you're trafficking drugs, don't speed.
That makes sense to me.
Oddly enough, it's a really good rule to live by. So I know we've been going for almost an hour here, so we're gonna wrap up soon. The other, I don't know if you guys have any other updates, but the other thing that I wanted to just kind of table, I guess, updates and initiatives that have kind of happened in parallel with the move coming back to Ottawa. So essentially a month or so prior to the move, we brought on a new ambassador onto the program, into the exercise mechanic. And for those that don't know, the ambassador program has been something that's been kind of like operating in the background for roughly a year or so. And the aim of that program is to bring in people who believe in what we want to do and what we're doing, and who want to contribute, and would like to be an instructor someday, or would like to contribute in another way, but they want to contribute towards the initiative moving forward. And so I'm really excited that we have 2 ambassadors that are relatively new, that came on essentially right before the move. So that's really cool. So they'll be able to grow with us. I'm excited to have them on the team. And then in addition to this, as a part of coming back to Ottawa, one of the things that we're going to be launching is an initiative that when I first had an education company called OFS, Ottawa Fitness Seminars, that I was doing at the beginning of that as a means of getting in reps teaching to selfishly help me ingrain material more. It was entirely self-serving. Is this idea of study groups. And so what we're going to be doing is at minimum one a month in the Ottawa area. We're going to be doing study groups on various topics. They're going to be completely free as a means of getting really crucial information out to fitness professionals. So you won't have to come to a course to get exposure to important information that will help you be a better trainer. The only thing that will cost you is your time. And so we're really excited about doing that. So stay tuned to Instagram as well as the email list for further details of the topics, locations, and the associated schedule. Those are the only other. I feel like I shared a lot of updates today, but that's like the big one from related to this initiative specifically that I'm really excited to bring back.
Cool. I'm excited.
As we start to wrap up here, do you guys have any closing thoughts, wisdom, perhaps? Ryan, I'm looking at you because you're the wisdom guy.
I don't know. I feel like I've used up my wisdom quota today.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't think I got anything in specific. I feel like I should close out every podcast. It should be like my catchphrase. I came up with this a number of years ago when we were at a client's birthday party. She was turning 60, big year or big event, and had like a big card for everybody to sign. And so everybody were like friends of these people, knew them personally. And I didn't, we chatted, but I didn't really know them outside of our time training together. But they were really kind and lovely people. So I just wrote down, squat deep in love with all your heart. So that's what I'll give the audience here today. Squat deep in love with all your heart.
I love it. I mean, the fact that Joel Seedman doesn't squat deep explains why he's got so many love problems.
Well, he's got the love of Jesus in his heart, which should be enough to fill it up. I should stop here before I start offending somebody.
We're done. Yeah, we're done. Gentlemen, thank you so much for today. Honestly, it's been really fun connecting with you guys again. I look forward to our next team pod next week. For those, if this is your first episode of the Exercise Mechanic, we release episodes every week, whether it be a team pod or a guest. We of course took a little bit of a break over the summer, but we are back. So just make sure you stay tuned over the course of the next weeks, months, and years. I'm going to dare to say that, but stay tuned because there's a lot more coming down the pipeline, whether it be, interesting guests and topics that we're going to be broaching over the course of the next months, as well as courses coming back, new updated course schedules for 2026, etc. So thank you so much. Hope you guys have a really great day, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye for now.